Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, that was a bit loud. My name's Stephen Doughty. I'm the Member of Parliament for Cardiff South and Penarth, the constituency that the Senedd is within, and an openly gay politician in Parliament in Westminster. I think we have the largest number now of LGBT politicians, I think, of any parliament in the world, and it's fantastic that we're able to express ourselves, be ourselves, and to share our stories and our histories in there as part of our daily life and our daily work. But we all know that that hasn't always been the case, and we often talk about firsts, and there are some very famous firsts that we will all know of. The first lesbian in Parliament, the first openly gay man. But are they the first? Are they the actual first people? Because there are so many stories and so many individuals whose histories have been lost. And I always find, coming to LGBT History Month events here and elsewhere, that it's often a complete revelation, often an inspiring revelation, to hear of stories and histories that were crucially important, of people who made an incredible difference, but perhaps weren't always able to live out their lives in the way that I am able to today as a Member of Parliament. So we've got two fantastic panellists who are going to be sharing with us some different stories, Morgan and Liz, and they're going to come up and make some brief remarks and presentation first, and then I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then we'll come out to the floor to take questions from you all. So without further ado, I want to introduce Councillor Liz Burnett from the Vale of Glamorgan Council, who's going to be speaking to us first.
Good afternoon. I'm going to be just giving you a brief, hopefully understanding of our ex-colleague, Margaret Alexander, Councillor Margaret Alexander, known to most as Maggie. And I brought her with me. I've stolen her off the wall of the council offices so you can see the woman. Maggie was born in Barry in February 1939 and moved into various locations around the Vale. She trained as a teacher in Birmingham and then worked in one of the UK's poorest areas in that area, starting to learn about social justice and disadvantage, where most of the children there were undernourished, neglected and abused. She returned to the Vale. She took 2 further degrees, taught in Barry Boys Comprehensive School, then went back to Birmingham, and whilst teaching there, fought against young girls in her charge being returned to other countries for forced marriage, and she fought against that. She then went back to London, and then she first started as a primary teacher, moved on to being a secondary teacher, and then specialised in special needs education. Ultimately, she returned back to Barry with her partner, Yvonne. She wrote and performed poetry, wrote short stories and plays. And to give you that's a little bit of a feel of the woman that was hugely interested in social justice, in the arts, in culture, but more so in people. She was a councillor for 17 years in Barry, first elected in 1995. And she's quoted as saying that her main purpose in becoming a politician was to play a part in attempting to reduce inequality, particularly among the young, so that they could begin their lives from a level playing field and make the best of their life chances. And this is a thread that went right the way through her time in the council. She was also a school governor in quite a number of schools. But then in terms of her impact politically, she was the first female mayor of the Vale of Glamorgan in 2005. At the end of 2006, she became the first female leader of the council. And it's particularly significant because that was mid-term, that the administration was in a complete mess. Social services were falling apart, huge deficits in budget. And she could have sat back and made huge political capital out of that. It was only a sort of year, 18 months out from a local government election. She could have sat back and pointed the finger. But actually, what she did was stitch together a coalition and took power and sorted it out. She was hugely supportive of women's rights, particularly of At Olive Row, the women's aid organisation in the Vale. And I think what I remember a lot about her were the vigils on King Square. I can see colleagues smiling in the front row on King Square in freezing temperatures. And she did not flinch, and so you couldn't either. Very prominent in the Vale Women's Forum, and I said also locally in the arts. She sadly died on the 26th of May 2012, only 3 weeks after being re-elected with yet another increased majority for her seat. Reviewing what people said at the time, they talked of her passion, her integrity, and her being straight speaking. We called it blunt. And most people can tell you about some of the barbed comments that she used against them, most of which aren't repeatable. But they also speak of her kindness, her determination to change things for the better. And staff speak of her support for them. Even now, staff will speak of her support for them. And for some, their pride in being asked to attend the civil partnership that she went through with her partner, Yvonne. And it was one of those members of staff that gave me this scarf on Friday and said, "Wear it for Margaret." In terms of the impact on the council, I don't think it's any mistake that the council, or that the Labour group within the council, became gender balanced in 2008, and it has never gone back. It's now better than gender balance. We've actually got a majority of women. Again, looking at female colleagues. And also, I think we can say that she was the founder of coalitions in the Vale Council. She built relationships with people. She never gave up. And she built strong relationships. And at the moment, we have now got another coalition in the Vale, which is strong, which is built on trust, which is built on relationships. And most of those are people that knew Margaret when she was there. So we've got a lot that we owe her, but a lot of our staff don't actually know about her history. So today, I wanted to come here to share a little bit with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Liz, and I knew Margaret well as well, and she was a truly remarkable woman, and it's fantastic you've been able to share her story. We will come over to Morgan now, who's going to talk, I think, predominantly about some Pride Cymru politicians.
Right, thank you. In Pride Cymru, the number 3 is iconic. Three-party activists, Saunders Lewis Valentine and DJ Williams, in 1937 were jailed for taking non-violent direct action against a bombing school in the Llŷn Peninsula. My research for a queer history of Pride Cymru explores how LGBT plus people fared within the political party, their personal experiences, other members' reactions, and public perceptions. So today, another three men. If you look at the screen, Karwyn James, Stuart Neal, and Peter Davis. Party members who were engaged in electoral politics during the 1970s, but whose sexuality impacted upon their political lives. The context of the era is important. The 1967 Sexual Offences Act had partly decriminalised gay relationships, but was, despite the parliamentary change, wider society by no means embraced homosexuality. In fact, there was an increased backlash. This hostile atmosphere made it especially difficult for gay men seeking public office. In Andrew Reynolds' book, The Children of Harvey Milk, he says, the most important catalyst of gay rights is often overlooked, individuals. So lost leaders narrate some of those battles. I'll talk first briefly about Karwyn James, a brilliant international rugby player, coach of Llanelli Rugby Football Club, coach to the British Isles team in New Zealand in 1971, an ardent Pride Cymru member and politically progressive. This is a difficult area. His sexuality became a cause célèbre after he died alone in an Amsterdam hotel at the age of 54. A recent biographer, Alan Gibbard, rejects any pressure to prove conclusively that he was actually gay, while honestly analysing the battle with sexuality that raged inside him. Of course, we cannot claim knowingness about the genuinely unknown, but my research reveals stronger evidence, so today I think we can perhaps claim Karwyn James as a gay man. He was a Pride Cymru member early on, working with Gwynfor Evans. Despite his stellar profile within establishment and masculine rugby, James was prepared to join Evans, who had been elected as the party's first MP in 1966, on a controversial peace mission to Vietnam in 1968 during the American War. And incidentally, Gwynfor Evans had voted in favour of sexual reform in 1967. And a young gay member of the party said that Gwynfor Evans was tolerant towards homosexuality. After the Vietnam episode, while still coach alternately, Karwyn James stayed in the dressing room as a protest when the all-white Springboks played them at home during January 1970. After these controversial stands, James stood as party candidate in the Llanelli constituency and did very well. He gained over 8,000 votes, second place to Labour. But party members at the time were ambivalent about James's homosexuality, and 1970 was to prove his only foray into electoral politics. He went into other things. Another parliamentary candidate in the 1970 election was Stuart Neal of Monmouth. And so you know about my state at the present moment in time. As I'm speaking, Stuart Neal is actually here in the audience. So I'm speaking about Stuart now, who's here. Not then openly gay for family reasons, Stuart embraced his sexuality and was active in party politics and the trades union movement. Okay, a former librarian and actor, lack of permanent theatre work led him to Abergavenny in 1965 to work in forestry. In 1966, he was elected as a shop steward for the National Union of Agricultural Workers and remained a shop steward all his working life for the union. And he also sat on the Trades Council. He was Plaid Cymru's first candidate on Abergavenny Borough Council. Although coming close in 5 local elections between 67 and 70, he never won a seat. But because of his ability and drive, he generated enormous press publicity for Plaid Cymru. The party recognised his skills by appointing him as its national agriculture spokesperson, and he was in great demand as a speaker in party events. Neil came out within Plaid Cymru after the 1970 election, which he says drew little obvious adverse reaction from members. But significantly for what was to follow, he combined his Plaid Cymru activity with activism for the Gay Liberation Front. He joined its Cardiff branch with Howard, who's here, and unlike many GLF members, he was publicly visible, using his campaigning skills he developed in Plaid Cymru. And the first Gay Lib manifestation in Cardiff, 14th of August 1971, which I think is a very, very important date, he was amongst a group of activists with a loudspeaker who joined the rear of the march that Howard has already alluded to this morning. And in the Gay Day, which took place in Boot Park, why isn't there a plaque there? Stuart is the L in Gay Lib. So there we are. He organised, when GLF organised a letter-writing campaign to equalise the age of consent, Stuart wrote to John Stradling Thomas, the Monmouthshire MP, about it. Possibly as a result of that event and the August events there, in September, the South Wales Echo published a large sympathetic feature on gay rights written by, I forgot his name, Pen Follett, but it was headlined, "Why Andrew Feels Like a Leper." But Stuart was easily identifiable from the description. Now then, the Oz trial, which was a famous trial at the time, triggered another remarkable initiative by Stuart. Plaid Cymru's newspaper, the Welsh Nation, had welcomed the successful appeal of the 3 Oz editors against their sentencing and asked how free the Free Whale should be. The following month, it published a 500-word letter, that document that you can see in front of you there, or you can see here there, written by Stuart, which blends GLF demands and Plaid Cymru aims, imagining a different Wales. And what's key about that document is how intersectional it is. It doesn't just talk about homosexual rights, it talks about women's rights, racial minorities' rights, poor people, or it calls coloured people. So it was a very, very advanced manifesto of its nature. And it was so advanced, remember, that Harvey Milk was not elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors until 6 years after that document was written and published at the time. Stuart's combination of electoral politics and gay activism soon came to an end. Addressing Swansea University Socialist Society in 1972, this is what he said, is published in the newspaper. He confessed he felt obliged to withdraw from standing as a parliamentary candidate because of the embarrassment it would cause to the party. So that was the thing. Yet circumstance drew him back into politics. When the local county councillor died in 1972, Stuart wanted to stand in the seat, but he heard that someone in the party wanted his candidature stopped. Only through the intervention of party chairman Phil Williams was his candidature secured. He was thus Plaid Cymru's first openly gay candidate. But in fact, his campaign was abandoned by the party. He stopped attending party meetings and felt personally abandoned. But Stuart was still active in CHE as well as GLF. He also continued his trade unionism, and in 1976 Stuart was elected to the UK's Agricultural Training Board, and in 1982 he was appointed as an employee representative on the European Commission's Joint Committee for Agriculture. From Plaid Cymru's perspective, it lost an articulate, forthright activist who could command media attention, a proven leader, an agricultural expert, and a trade unionist of growing influences. All political spaces where the party needed to make advances but didn't. Now then, I like to think that Stuart's Gay Future manifesto may have been seen by a 16-year-old Rubina schoolboy who wrote in the Welsh Nation a few months later, seeking a job with a Welsh-speaking family. The self-confidence and clarity of purpose proved to be a characteristic, the guy on the right-hand side there, Peter Hugh Davis. Peter was the leader of a talented group of Plaid Cymru activists who attended Whitchurch High School. Somebody needs to write a gay history of Whitchurch High School, I can tell you now. I knew. So many people. It's really interesting. And Kincoy. Beneficiaries of the 67 Act, they were active in Cardiff's emerging gay scene, and they were politically radicalised at the time of the rise of the British right, then the National Front, and an increasingly reactionary Conservative Party. Plaid Cymru's Rubina branch comprised many young gay men, mostly well-educated, middle-aged and Welsh-speaking. And they worked with similar gay men from other parties as well. In 1978, Plaid Cymru, the party, at its conference, passed a resolution to reaffirm total opposition to all prejudice on grounds of race, creed, sexual preference, or language. It was Davis's Cardiff Northwest constituency that was both a co-sponsor of the motion. They also asked the party to draw up a charter of minority rights to flesh out that in-principle decision. But the collapse of the first assembly referendum in 1978 caused the party to go into meltdown, and that charter was never, ever progressed until 14 years later. But Peter Davis's political activities were cut short when his out sexuality was rejected by his family. In response, he moved to Sussex, then Australia. And there he found an outlet for his political radicalism and gay equality in a new party, the Australian Democrats. The ADs had a strong green credential, stood for reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, homosexual law reform, and gender equality. Peter Davis was an active campaigner, particularly for women candidates, and he was a fundraiser, but he was also a leading political organizer and propagandist. He was its national membership officer, and he was a staffer for its leader, Senator Meg Lees. So sorry, I'll be very, very quick now. Revealing of his principles, and I hope you find this particularly interesting, When the Australian Labour Party wanted to put up a gay man as a candidate in a Sydney constituency against a pro-rights independent MP in 1995, Peter Davis was outraged, and he laid down the line to the gay community, a bizarre decision which threatens to destabilise an effective campaign in our interests. The independent candidate won, and looking at Peter Davis there, I'd like you to remember that today, that independent candidate is none other than the Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore. So I like to think that Peter Davis actually helped the political career, of Clover Moore. So Peter was, a hugely influential figure in Australian politics. So we have the stories of 3 gay political figures who negotiated different ways. They were all talented, charismatic, and ambitious. And I'm sure they were potential leaders needlessly lost. Diolch yn fawr.
Apologies, I'm getting nervous looks from the organisers about the timings because of all the events today. So I just wanted to ask one question of Liz and Morgan, but then we'll hopefully have time for maybe 1 or 2 quick ones from the floor. I'm getting a nod for that, so I think that's okay. I mean, you spoke of people not knowing Liz, not knowing Margaret today in the council, not realising that history. And I think more we were talking earlier on, you were talking about history needs to be written backwards, and we need to sort of fill in all those gaps. Why do you think it's relevant to actually tell these stories and tell the examples today to sort of, the contemporary world? Why do people need to know these stories?
It's strange, in the Vale, in Barry, we're doing a lot of work at the moment on sense of place, of actually helping people understand the history of their town and their communities. So we feel very strongly that you can't move forward unless you understand where you came from. And in the Vale, Margaret played a very big part in how the council is formed, how we work, the culture of the council. And we've got, she's an important role model, but we've also got an LGBT network in the council, which is a really strong and productive network. But actually, they themselves say that they are predominantly male-dominated. And so it's really important that Margaret is actually up there showing that we are an inclusive council and that there is a role for any other lesbians or anyone else in the council to come forward. And hopefully that will start to play out as well. So, really important that people know the history, not only of their council, but of their politicians.
Similar view, or?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's important we honour pioneers and remember pioneers and what they did, and sacrifice and whatever. But also, of course, progress has to be fought for, and progress has also to be defended. And in today's global environment, in some parts of the world, maybe it's under threat. So I think knowing struggle is as important as celebrating success.
Absolutely. No, fantastic. Completely agree with that. I'll take some points from the audience, really quick, short questions. I'll take them in a group of 3, just so we give both of them a chance to respond. Does anybody want to ask questions? You can certainly make a comment. Go for it.
I'm Councillor Margaret Wilkinson, and I do get sometimes people call me Margaret Alexander. But I work with Margaret. She was a fantastic person. She left her mark, and I'll never forget her. I'm sorry. Because she died suddenly, we've never got over that. But she left her mark in the schools where she worked as well. And she brought people on, and she encouraged people. She was a fantastic person. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret, and completely agree with all of that. She was a remarkable woman. Anybody else would like to make a comment or ask a question? Yes, that's all right.
I knew Margaret for many years personally, and as in my professional life. I worked for the Assembly member, and you're right, Liz, in those years the council was falling apart, and my workload was nearly all about the Vale of Glamorgan Council at that time. And I know what Margaret did behind the scenes, her political pragmatism and her skills for bringing people together. I've never known anyone like that. She would have made a fantastic Assembly member or MP. She is a huge loss. But it's not just about those kind of very visible skills. She was really good at down-to-earth stuff. And when we helped to set up a pensioners club after they were evicted from their home, we won't go into all that now, but there were about 50 pensioners, and they all made formal complaints which went to the Ombudsman, went to the Older Persons Commissioner, and it was Margaret who individually, she and I went and saw each one of those people and wrote individual letters, and we didn't let it drop. The council were trying to fob us off. We did not let it drop. And we set up a new club, which is still going, and those old people remember Margaret really well. And she used to come in and make tea and wash the dishes. You know, her and I were the only volunteers at the beginning, and that club is still going. And, you know, it's that kind of thing that I think we need to remember people for as well, that ability to make contact and to touch people's lives at every level. And Margaret was an expert at that. And somebody needs to write a book about her.
There we are.
Absolutely. This is probably the start of that process, maybe an offer there. Any last questions or comments? Ash?
It's a question really to all of the panel, but we've got LGBT politicians at all levels of democracy now. But, you know, as someone who's now openly bisexual in the community, I was never open about it before my own election. And I just wonder on the panel's comments on, do you think we do enough to make sure the politicians who are openly LGBT are accepted when they stand for election?
Very, very good question. I mean, having stood as a candidate yourself?
Yeah. At different times. Yeah, I can't honestly answer that, but I think it's more than just the candidates having to do that. I think it's society and, you know, the new curriculum. Yeah. I think removing some of all the prejudices and ignorance, I think is a part of it, but it has to be part of all of it. I think it's obviously up to the individual, I guess.
Liz?
Exactly as Morgan said, it's got to be up to the individual and what they feel comfortable with. I mean, you don't want to have sort of forced outing of political candidates. That's not the way forward. But we need to have a supportive environment. I talked about Margaret's influence on getting gender balance in the council, and I mean that's a given now. We've one of our councillors is LGBT. And the observer to our group for quite a while was trans. There's nothing different, you know, there's nothing special about that from our group's perspective. And so we should have those supportive environments that we want to be a diverse group, and we will support anyone that participates. And I think that's what we're aiming for, and we're aiming for that both within our group, within our, you know, within our political parties, and then hopefully within wider society. But whichever way it goes, we will be supportive.
And I mean, speaking personally, I mean, you know, I wasn't accepted to a few friends when I stood as a candidate, but obviously once I was elected as well, I was very clear and actually had a sort of an early opportunity to do that through being on the equal marriage bill and various other processes that went on. But I think, you know, you have to create that culture in parties and society as a whole. And I think, you know, what was said about sex and relationships education and also probably leads on well to the next session, but, you know, visibility being crucially important. It's one of the reasons why we as a group certainly within the Labour Party in Parliament, but also I think across the parties have made a big thing the last few years of being a visible group there because of the example that then sets and hopefully inspires others to come forward and be open and out, you know, not only when they're elected but also beforehand, and it just isn't an issue in the future. I think we've got to move on. Time is pushing on. But thank you very much. Some fascinating stories, some inspiring stories. I think a fitting tribute to Margaret in particular. Really lovely. And, you know, delightful to have Stuart here with us as well in person. So look forward to hearing more throughout the course of this afternoon. But diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much.